A huge storm is going to be coming to the United States over the next few days, and this large storm is going to bring a ton of different problems. This includes the threat of some significant severe weather today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and even Thursday of this week. This will all begin in the Great Plains, moving through the Midwest and as well as the Ohio Valley and as well as the lower Mississippi Valley, bringing the risk for damaging winds, large to very large hail, and several tornadoes. So in this forecast, we'll be breaking down everything that you need to know about these storms, where they're going to happen, the exact timing, and as well as the threats that you can expect in your location. I do want to begin with what's happening though right now in the United States that'll end up leading to this large storm. And right now we do have some cloud cover beginning to build into areas like the southern plains, and this is all ahead of this low pressure system that is beginning to cross over the Rocky Mountains. And the low pressure system is going to arrive to the central plains later today, and this will eventually lead to the threat of severe weather across areas like Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, with all modes of severe weather being possible. But with that being said, today's threat is going to be a lot more conditional than what we're looking at tomorrow, because overall this low pressure system, it's going to be very behind in terms of timing with the overall amount of moisture that we're going to have, in addition to the instability. So today's severe weather event will be very hit or miss across the Great Plains. Some areas may get some significant, some severe weather. Some areas may not get really anything when it comes to severe weather. It's going to be a highly conditional and highly isolated threat of severe weather today. But once we go into tomorrow, the storm is eventually going to move into the Midwest, and we are eventually going to get a much more numerous threat of severe weather from the Midwest back into the Mississippi Valley and as well as the southern plains, where there will be some more significant severe weather on Tuesday, and we'll be talking about that here in just a moment. Now let's talk more about that severe weather potential for the next few days, and we're going to begin with today. There is an enhanced risk for severe weather for Nebraska, Kansas, and even southern South Dakota, with the threat of all modes of severe weather. We also have a slight risk that goes anywhere from South Dakota back into Texas, so it's overall a pretty large area today. In addition to this, we also have a slight risk on the East Coast that we'll not talk about too much, but there will be a chance for some damaging winds and large hail. And then there's also a marginal threat that stretches across the Ohio Valley and anywhere from South Dakota back into Texas, with all modes of severe weather being possible. That includes the threat of damaging winds, which will actually be one of the lower threats for today. This will include areas in Nebraska, Kansas, and back into areas like north central Texas, and as well as back into areas like Virginia. In addition to this, the large to very large hail threat is really the main concern for today. So very large hail is a possibility across the central plains, including South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and back into north central Texas. We could see some storms produce hail greater than 2 inches in diameter in both of those hatched areas, so definitely make sure that you are protecting your vehicle. And then also the tornado risk has recently just been upgraded by the Storm Prediction Center. We do have a 10% hatched area from Kansas back into Nebraska, where there may be an isolated strong tornado, but again, the tornado risk today is still pretty conditional at this point, just due to the factor that we have a cap in place, and as well as a lot of cloud cover, and as well as the timing of this particular trough is really off comparatively to what it could have been. If the timing was better and we didn't really have much of a cap, I do think that there would be a much higher risk even for tornadoes. So overall, there is still a chance for a few tornadoes today, but it is a lower risk comparatively to what we could have had. Before the timing today, we will begin with the southern plains and then move into the central plains. This afternoon, we're really going to have really not a whole lot of activity. There will be probably a couple of storms that fire off in west and central Texas, closer to areas like Abilene, where some large to very large hail, damaging winds, and maybe an isolated tornado will be possible. But the threat overall looks to be very isolated. And even further to the north, around 8 to 9 o'clock in Oklahoma, there will be a couple of storms that try to fire off, but the cap and as well as the cloud cover are going to play a massive factor in today's severe weather, which will probably limit the majority of these storms from forming. But I still wouldn't rule out that we get some sort of very large hail event or maybe an isolated tornado in one of these areas today. And then once we go later into the evening, so around about 10 to 11 o'clock, there will be a better shot for maybe an isolated storm or two to fire off in central or west Texas. But overall, it looks very isolated, and really it doesn't look to be too crazy today across the southern plains. What does look a bit crazier would be in the central plains, though. One thing that's really crazy to begin with is the tornado parameter values, which are upwards of 5 to 6, and it only goes on a scale from 0 to 10. Even though these values are high, that does not necessarily mean that we are going to be seeing a significant tornado risk. And as of now, it's probably not going to happen, just because of the fact that this trough is lagging behind. The timing is just very off with this low pressure system, and the dry line is probably not going to be set up quick enough for there to be a significant tornado risk. With that said, we probably will still have at least a couple of tornadoes, or maybe even a few tornadoes today across parts of the northern central plains and even back into the southern plains for those in Oklahoma, Nebraska, and as well as Kansas. So you definitely still want to make sure that you have a tornado action plan in place and you have multiple ways to receive alerts. Here's the timing for today. Showers and storms will fire up near the Nebraska and South Dakota border as we get closer to 6 to 7 o'clock this evening. There will be a chance for some storm activity right along the Kansas and Nebraska border as well this evening, where there will be some large hail, damaging winds, and maybe an isolated tornado. The storms in the central plains, specifically near Kansas, will try to get going right around about 8, 9, 10 o'clock this evening. These storms, though, will struggle. I think that we could get a tornado or two out of that activity, but it's going to be a very hit or miss opportunity there. And then back down in Oklahoma for right now, looks to be very dry, but I'm not ruling out an isolated storm or two. Once we go into the late evening, into the overnight hours, storms move off to the east, and by tomorrow morning, this is at 6 a.m., storms will be back over in areas like eastern Kansas with mainly some damaging wind potential and maybe an isolated tornado. And then we're really done talking about this for those in the southern and central plains. And then once we go into Tuesday, which is tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday, we do have an enhanced risk for severe weather across parts of the Midwest. This includes Iowa, Missouri, and as well as Illinois. This is where there could be a significant tornado risk. So if you're in this area, definitely make sure that you have a tornado action plan in place just in case you do end up seeing a tornado. Outside of this area, though, we are still watching for at least an isolated to widely scattered severe weather threat that extends anywhere from South Dakota and Wisconsin back into Texas and as well as Arkansas and Louisiana. With that being said, the main concern as we go into tomorrow is going to be large to very large hail. We actually do have a hatched area for tomorrow across Iowa, Illinois, and as well as Missouri, where there could be some significant hail. That's anywhere from 2 to 3 inches in diameter that could occur tomorrow in a couple of isolated locations. So definitely make sure that you are protecting your vehicle and protecting outdoor plants. But notice the Storm Prediction Center does have an enhanced risk here for tornadoes. That means that there is a chance in this particular area, anywhere from southern Iowa, northeastern Missouri, and western Illinois, for a few tornadoes, and a strong tornado or two cannot be ruled out. And I'm not ruling out an isolated tornado across Illinois. We will likely be going live for this tomorrow at some point. There's probably going to be 2 different live streams. I do have a conflict from 2 to 4, so we'll probably have a live stream before that and one after that. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, and we'll be keeping you posted with the latest on this severe weather event. Now, when we look at the tornado parameter values for Tuesday, they are actually much lower than Monday. With that being said, this area of storms is going to be more organized than what we're talking about today, which will lead to a better chance for tornadoes. And notice this as we go right around lunchtime tomorrow. We are going to be watching for an elevated tornado risk across southeast Iowa. Notice some of these red colors here. That would be indicating a higher tornado potential across southeast Ohio and even into northern Missouri. So overall, it's going to be a bit more organized tomorrow for a tornado risk, especially across southeast Iowa, northeast Missouri, and as well as western Illinois. And then once we go later into the evening hours, the tornado risk overall is going to be a bit lower across much of Illinois, but it's definitely not going to be zero. So if you're anywhere in Illinois, you should still have a tornado action plan in place and have multiple ways to receive alerts, as there will be a bit more of an elevated tornado risk there. Here's the timing for tonight into tomorrow. So most areas in the Midwest, not talking about much tonight. There will be a couple of isolated showers or storms in western Iowa overnight tonight. Once we go into tomorrow morning, this area of storm activity will become linear and move into areas like central Iowa, where there will be a chance for some damaging winds, isolated large hail, and perhaps an isolated tornado. But that tornado risk really ramps up as we go into the afternoon hours. There will be plenty of spin in these storms, meaning that there will be a chance for a couple of tornadoes during the early to mid-afternoon hours. And then once we get closer to about 3 to 4 o'clock, these storms are moving into Wisconsin and as well as Illinois. And by the time we get closer to 5, 6, 7 o'clock, those storms are moving into much of eastern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, which there will still be a chance here for some damaging winds. We may get an isolated storm behind this, but I don't anticipate much severe weather if that happens. Maybe some large hail, maybe an isolated tornado. We'll have to wait and see what it looks like tomorrow. It's going to depend a lot on if there's a really fast recovering air mass. And then once we go into the overnight hours, these storms eventually weaken as they move into areas like the Ohio Valley, but they will strengthen again as we go into Wednesday, which is Wacky Weather Wednesday. We do currently have a slight risk for severe weather. This does include Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee, a marginal threat that goes all the way back up into Michigan and as far south as Mississippi and Alabama. The main concern for that day is going to be damaging winds, but there may be some large hail and possibly a couple of tornadoes. And then as we go into Thursday, which is tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday, we do have a slight risk for those in Missouri, Oklahoma, as well as a very small sliver of Kansas, western Arkansas, and as well as North Texas, where there will be some damaging winds and large hail. Tornado risk looks very low for Thursday, but we'll continue to keep you posted with this day, and we'll be keeping you posted with all the timing as well for all these days as we get closer. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. We'll probably be live both today and tomorrow, so stay tuned.